Dr. Martinez-Prather. Thank you for your time. First of all, what stood out to you about this final report?
Well, with this final report, a year's worth of conducting this work, I think that school districts are in a place where they are taking school safety and security seriously. We had 95% of our campuses that we didn't have um, um, uh, an unauthorized access. And so that's a good thing. But there's still work to be done, and we can't become complacent. And so this needs to be at top of mind for school districts every single day, even throughout the summer.
And of course, you're alluding to the little bit more than 4% of the time inspectors were able to gain access. So how would you characterize that? You already said there more work needs to be done, but how else would you describe that?
So access control seems to be a very basic best practice. And as we've said before, we really push districts to really understand that access control can really change the course of very serious situations that can occur on a campus. And it definitely creates time barriers, and we know time barriers save lives. And so we have a lot of work to do in making sure that school districts don't become complacent, ensuring that they're consistently locking those exterior doors, because what we did see in the majority of cases is that those unauthorized access came from secondary doors, not the primary entrance. And so that is something that we still need to educate and train school districts on, and making sure that they are keeping that at top of mind. And so I think conducting those weekly door sweeps that are required now helps to ensure that they are engaging in those practices on a regular basis.
Do you hope that those weekly sweepings will reduce that 4%? And is that 4%, does that sound high to you?
I think that you're always going to have new people in place, and you're always going to be training, and always going to wanting to make sure that you have staff and students that understand what the policies and procedures are to keep those campuses safe. So I think the weekly door sweeps over time are going to help with that, and making sure that it's consistent and it's top of mind, and that we don't forget that that's an important practice that has to be implemented every single day while we have our students on campus.
And you alluded to this already. Most of the time, the inspectors gain that access through a secondary door. So I'm assuming a back door or something other than the front entrance. And out of that, it took inspectors between a minute to 5 minutes to gain access. How concerning are those numbers?
Well, it's always concerning if you're able to gain unauthorized access. And so that's why I think that it's important to consistently train not just your staff, but also students, to make sure that they're not propping doors, opening doors to people that they don't know or don't have a visitor badge. So that is why one of the elements that we also looked for was evaluating their check-in procedures. It's a best practice to make sure that you have limited points of access into a campus, and that you have someone there who is checking in and checking out individuals that are in the campus, and also empowering school staff when they see somebody that looks out of place or doesn't have that proper identification, to approach them and ask them, what are they doing here? And make sure that they're following those procedures that they have in place.
Now that you have this final report, what's next?
Well, this work continues. In HB3, it's now required that the Texas Education Agency oversee this work. And so we're working very collaboratively with them, and have done in this process as they take over these intruder detection audits moving into the next school year.
Okay, so their audits will continue. These random inspections will continue just under the purview of TEA.
That is correct.
Okay, okay. And let's see, looking back at this, what worked and what didn't work about these inspections?
I think that there was a lot of anxiety in the beginning about what the intruder detection audits were and what they were not. And so we did a lot of education in the beginning to really get districts to understand that these are things that you should already be doing as part of your safety and security audit procedures, which is evaluating your own access control measures. And so we spent a lot of time in the beginning trying to educate our school personnel that in most cases, you're never going to know that an inspector is there. We're not simulating an active threat event. And I think there was a lot of concern about that. And I think that intruder detection audit sort of has that connotation with it. But in the end, we were here looking at very specific things that school districts already should be doing. And a lot of lessons learned throughout this process and how to make it better, and really learning a little bit more about what we can do to educate our school districts about something as simple as controlling access to your individual campuses.
Right. Locking a door when you're supposed to.
Yes.
Dr. Martinez-Prather, I wanted to ask you, do you think this report will make parents feel better about school safety, about where they send their kids?
Well, parents are a critical stakeholder when it comes to safety and security of the campuses, and especially where they send their students. And so it's important that they understand that these things are taking place, what we're evaluating, but also how can they be a part of the solution and be a part of ensuring the safety and security of their own campus. So they have a role to play in this as well. And part of that is, making sure that even though they know the folks at the campus and they're recognized, that they have to go through those procedures as well, and understanding the importance of it, and also having those critical conversations with their children about why these things are in place. And so I think this report does shed light on the efforts that are being done across the state of Texas. But as always, there's always room for improvement, and we'll continue to support districts in that effort.
Dr. Martinez-Prather, what was the reaction to the findings of the report? Have you heard from Governor Abbott since he ordered the institution of these random inspections?
So we have kept the governor's office up to date throughout the year on the process. And so they've been well informed of the work that we're doing, along with other of our policymakers and stakeholders. And as I've mentioned, we worked very closely with the Texas Education Agency and our education service centers on this work. And just making sure that this process was reviewed and understood to be a collaborative partnership with our school districts, and not an I gotcha, but more of an educational approach to how they can improve their safety and security posture.
Am I hearing that most people are satisfied that actual audit was taking place, that actually happened? But what about the results? Have you heard anything about that?
Well, the report recently just came out, and so we're happy to see that in majority of the cases, over 75% of the campuses that got audited, there was no corrective action. And so that gives us some sense of comfort, but also knowing too that we had districts that still had findings in certain areas. And so there's still work that we need to do to train and educate our schools. And we'll continue to work with our leadership and school districts to do that work.
How involved, Dr. Martinez-Prather, will your center be involved with the TEA in handing over the audits?
So right now we're in the process of assisting with that transition, but it is a very well-coordinated partnership. So TEA will be overseeing the regulation of school safety, and our role in all of this is we're a research center here at Texas State University, so we're informing best practices, making sure that school districts are being trained. And how those two things align is that we're working with the Texas Education Agency. So as they're out there checking for compliance with many of these school safety mandates, that they are working in coordination with us to make sure that they're aligned with what is being trained on, what is being put out as best practices. So it's a very close partnership, but we are not a regulatory authority, and that is the area that TEA comes in to support districts with.
Will there be any recommendations you make to the TEA moving forward with those audits? Any tweaks with those random inspections?
Well, I think right now we've been able to work through this process, and I think one of the things that we learned a lot throughout this process is just coming across districts that may not necessarily qualify for an intruder detection audit. Sometimes you have schools that there's no students in place. So how do we handle those situations where you may have a campus that's located on an institution of higher education, right? And how do you handle those situations? And so I think those are things we're talking through and working through, but also just making sure that we continue to educate schools on all of these different areas that we're evaluating them on. So they're not waiting for an inspector to come, that they are doing these things proactively every single day. And what was interesting about the intruder detection audits is that they were going on every single day of every week for this last school year. And I think school districts quickly learned from the process about what they needed to do to make some improvements on their end. And so that was the whole part of issuing corrective actions, which ultimately came down to training and making sure that that training is on a consistent basis. Because as I've said before, we've got, district leadership coming in and out and teachers changing all the time. And so it's important that that continuity takes place.
And will Texas School Safety Center inspectors continue to do the audits for the TEA?
So we partnered actually with the education service centers to go out and do these inspections. And the purpose behind that is they are geographically located across the state of Texas. And so I assume that it will still take place, working with our education service centers to continue that work moving forward. And it's certainly work that we couldn't have done without our ESC partners.
Gotcha. So the 20 ESCs around the state, individual people will just check regionally those school districts then.
That is correct.
That sounds good. Was there anything else moving forward that we need to know about the audit? Do you know when the next one will start? I'm assuming coinciding with the next academic school year.
These audits will continue. HB3 is effective 9/1, and so these audits will continue into the next school year. But there will be, an effort to educate our school districts on what to expect if there are any changes. But these are things that we're proactively working on this summer in preparation for the next school year.
Dr. Kathy Martinez-Prather, was there anything else I left out that you think viewers need to know about these inspections?
No.
All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Be safe.
Thank you.